Hello, everyone, and welcome to LM 407 Introduction to International Business. And this is our live session number one, and we'll be having these every week throughout the course. And I'd like to welcome you in person and also if you're watching this recording. Hi, I'm Dr. John Crispin, and I'm your instructor, and I'm happy to be here. And I'm happy that you're here. So tonight we're going to go through sort of a review on some of what went on in week one, and also a few things that are going to happen this week in week two. So let's get started. I'll share the screen, and I have a PowerPoint presentation. By the way, this presentation recording will be available to you along with this slideshow presentation for your review, and you may use it as you see fit to prepare for your assignments for this week. So this is LM 407, in case you're wondering, and it's Introduction to International Business. And here are some top international companies, and most of them that you probably recognize all of them. And these are, as of 2009, this list has changed considerably since then. This is what our textbook has. International business is the study of transactions taking place across national borders for the purpose of satisfying the needs of individuals and organizations. And these economic transactions consist of trade, as in the case of exporting and importing, and foreign direct investment, as in the case of companies funding operations in other countries. Over half of the world trade and approximately 80% of all foreign direct investment is made by the 500 largest firms in the world. And these companies, called multinational enterprises, or MNEs, are firms that are headquartered in one country but have operations in one or more other countries. So, who are these firms? And some of them you may already know by name because you have used their products or seen their advertising. In order of annual revenue, here's a list of some of the largest six MNEs that each grossed more than 125 billion in dollars in 2009. That's according to Fortune Global 500 in their 2010 ranking. So globalization is based upon interdependence. And here's a chart that's showing interdependence of locations. And this is an especially complex issue and is associated with the growth of the international firm. At its most basic level, the growth of trade has reduced distances, and concurrent growth of M&Es has accelerated this trend. The borders of the countries and cities and regions have become increasingly blurred because the economic actors located within that location also have operations in multiple other locations at the country level. It affects the identity of the nation state. So, how does the threat of raising U.S. tariffs affect interdependence of locations? Something to consider and look into. There's a tendency to mistake internationalization for globalization, and the key to differentiating the two is the issue of interdependence. Interdependence is the existence of globalization, and as usual, it is a continuum with firms, individuals, and countries demonstrating degrees of interdependence. So, understanding globalization requires us to appreciate the increasing degree of interdependence between economic units, whether firms, individuals, or countries. And the term interdependence has a very specific meaning. It refers to a mutual reliance between groups of actors, and the degree of this mutual reliance can vary considerably. Members of a soccer team are typically deeply interconnected with high degree of interdependence, would be one example. So in mapping globalization, it's not as straightforward to map globalization. Globalization has to do with the intertwining of a number of social, economic, and political factors. And the problem is that all linked to human behavior and action. And understanding human behavior is unfortunately not a science, but a social science. And you'll find as a manager and a leader, this becomes central to your leadership style, is understanding and manage human behavior. So those associated with socio-political developments. These would be political decisions or indecision that shape the success or failure of firms and the competitiveness of countries. Liberalization and the preferred policy orientation of a country play a significant role in shaping economic policy. And those associated with technology and innovation would be the ability of firms to be successful. It depends ultimately on their ability to generate new ideas through innovation, and obviously, firms shape the competitiveness of the location they are in. So, we discuss this in much greater detail in chapters 3 and 10. There are an assortment of push and pull factors as well, which affect capacity of a firm to internationalize. And at the upstream end of the firm's activities, it must balance push factors arising from rising prices or inputs that encourage it to go abroad to seek cheaper inputs. At the same time, these activities are pulled abroad because there are scale economies from relocating these activities in foreign locations. Likewise, at the downstream end and closer to the final market and the customer, there are a variety of push and pull factors. And the home market may be mature, and firms need to seek new opportunities for growth in new and faster growing countries. Push factor. On the other hand, there may be barriers to exports that encourage the firm to relocate production overseas, acting as a pull factor. We see a number of Japanese and Korean automobile firms relocating here in the United States for that very reason. So, some key points. There is little doubt that we live in a world defined by globalization. Globalization, however, remains a vague concept used by different people in different ways. Our text defines economic globalization as the growing interdependence of locations and economic actors across countries and regions. Number two, international business is the study of transactions taking place across national borders for the purpose of satisfying the needs of individuals and organizations. Two of the most common types of international business activity are export import and foreign direct investment, or FDI. In recent years, both have been on the rise. And much of this is a result of large multinational enterprises, or M&Es. Number three, small and medium-sized enterprises, or SMEs, often function as the backbone of large M&Es, efficiently providing goods and services that are integrated into the latter's production process. SMEs also compete with M&Es in niche markets. SMEs are often more flexible than the M&Es, but struggle to match M&Es in terms of resources. And finally, number four, institutions are defined as sets of common habits, routines, established practices, rules, or laws that regulate the interaction between individuals and groups. Understanding institutions, both formal and informal, is important for both firms and employees, so they can adjust their behaviors accordingly. To continue, number five, trade regulation has become an important issue in international business. And today, the World Trade Organization, or WTO, is the major supranational body responsible for governing the international trading system. Number six, there are two ways to measure FDI: FDI stock and FDI flow. Inward FDI flow is money coming into a country during the reporting year from foreign-owned M&Es, which have their subsidiaries in a recipient country. Outward FDI flows are monies going out from firms that are registered in the home country to another country through their subsidiaries abroad. FDI flow is different from FDI stock. The latter looks at the accumulation of FDI over time, whereas FDI flow only looks at FDI inflow or outflow in one reporting year. FDI stock is a more reliable indicator of FDI activity in countries. And number seven, international production and trade are increasingly organized within global value chains, GVCs, of global production and global production networks, or GPNs, where the different stages of the production process are located across different countries. And due to the globalization nature of some markets, it is advantageous for firms to develop products in different countries to benefit from home country's location advantages. So now that kind of brings us up to where we are today and what's ahead of us in week 2. And again, when you have different cultures, it's not just about the materials and the production process, it is also importantly about the people who do the work. And the people who do the work could be a diverse group coming from different parts across the MNE's network, or they could be in a different country away from where the MNE is, and the MNE sends managers to that local country to get the best production and productivity. And so there are things that the manager must do and must know. And so Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory is a framework for understanding how cultural values influence behavior in organizational settings, including managerial decision making. So this was developed by Geert Hofstede, and it identifies 6 key dimensions that describe cultural differences across societies. And these dimensions help managers navigate cross-cultural interactions, make informed decisions, and adapt leadership styles to diverse work environments. So below, I'm going to describe each dimension, its relevance to managerial decision-making, and how managers can effectively use this tool. The description of Hofstede's cultural dimensions is that it measures the extent to which less powerful members of a society accept and expect unequal power distribution. High PDI cultures, for instance, India, Russia, for example, accept hierarchical structures, while low PDI cultures, for instance, Denmark and New Zealand, favor equality and collaboration. Managerial implications are in high PDI cultures, managers may need to adopt authoritarian decision-making styles as employees expect clear directions. On the other hand, in low PDI cultures, participative or democratic approaches involving team input are more effective. So an application of this concept would be managers can assess the PDI of their team's culture to tailor their leadership style. And for example, in a high PDI setting, they might centralize decisions to align with expectations, while in the low PDI environments, they could foster open discussions to boost engagement. Now, individualism versus collectivism, or IDV, its description is as follows. It reflects whether a society prioritizes individual goals, in other words, individualisms in the case of USA or Australia, or a group harmony and collective goals, collectivism, such as China or South Korea. Managerial implications in individualistic cultures, managers can motivate employees with personal rewards and recognition. And in collectivist cultures, team-based incentives and group cohesion are more effective. So one way to apply this is that managers can design reward systems based on this dimension. And so for an example, in a collectivist culture, they might emphasize team bonuses, where an individualist culture, they could highlight personal career growth opportunities. Other attributes such as masculinity versus femininity, MAS, its description indicates whether a society values competitive, achievement-oriented traits, masculinity, for instance, Japan, Germany, or cooperative, nurturing traits, such femininity, such as Sweden or Netherlands. The managerial implications of this would be in masculine cultures, managers may prioritize performance-driven decisions and competitive strategies. In feminine cultures, decisions should emphasize work-life balance, collaboration, and employee well-being. One way to apply this would be that managers can align organizational goals with cultural values. For example, in a masculine culture, they might set aggressive sales targets, while in a feminine culture, they could focus on creating supportive work environments. Uncertainty Avoidance Index, or UAI, is described as measures a society's tolerance for ambiguity and uncertainty. And high UAI cultures, such as Greece and Portugal, prefer structure and rules, while low UAI cultures, such as Singapore and the United Kingdom, are more comfortable with risk and change. Managerial implications of this could be in high UAI cultures, managers should provide clear guidelines and minimize risks in decision making. In low UAI cultures, they can encourage innovation and flexibility. Application could be that managers can adjust their approach to change management. For instance, in high UAI strategies, they might implement detailed plans and communicate extensively to reduce anxiety, while in low UAI settings, they can promote experimentation. Long-term versus short-term orientation, or LTO, is described as reflects a society's focus on long-term planning and preservation and perseverance. Long-term, for instance, would be China, South Korea, versus intermediate results and tradition. Short-term versus, for example, USA and Nigeria. Managerial implications could be in the long-term oriented cultures. Managers should prioritize sustainable strategies and investments. And in short-term oriented cultures, quick wins and immediate outcomes are valued. An application in this might be managers can align strategic planning with cultural orientation. For example, in a long-term oriented culture, they might focus on building enduring customer relationships, while in a short-term culture, they could emphasize quarterly performance metrics. Indulgence versus restraint, or IVR, is described as it measures whether a society allows free expression of desires and enjoyment. That would be indulgence. For instance, Mexico and Australia rather, or suppresses gratification for strict social norms. Restraint would be Russia or China. Managerial implications could be in indulgent cultures, managers can foster creative and flexible work environments. In restrained cultures, adherence to rules and discipline is more effective. An application, managers can tailor workplace policies. For example, in indulgent cultures, they might encourage social events or flexibility schedules, while in restrained cultures, they could emphasize professionalism and structure. Next is in using Hofstede's cultural dimensions, managers can use cultural assessment. And managers could use Hofstede's framework to analyze the cultural profiles of their teams, organizations, or markets. Tools like Hofstede's country comparison database, which is available online, provide scores for each dimension, enabling managers to understand cultural tendencies. And for example, a manager leading a team in Japan, high PDI, high MAS, would adopt a structured hierarchical approach compared to a team in Sweden, low PDI, low MAS. This can create tailored decision making. By aligning decisions with cultural dimensions, managers can improve team buy-in and effectiveness. For instance, when launching a project in a high UAI culture, managers should provide detailed plans and risk mitigation strategies to gain trust. And in contrast, in a low UAI culture, they can propose innovative ideas with less rigid frameworks. And cross-cultural teams management. In multinational teams, managers can use the framework to bridge cultural gaps. For example, combining team members from individualistic, for instance, USA, and collectivist, for instance, China, cultures requires balancing individual recognitions with team cohesion. Managers might assign individual tasks, but celebrate group achievements to satisfy both preferences. In conflict resolution, cultural misunderstanding often leads to workplace conflicts. By understanding dimensions like PDI and IDV, managers can mediate effectively. And for instance, in a high PDI culture, employees may hesitate to challenge a manager's decision. So managers should proactively seek feedback to avoid miscommunication. In training and development, managers can use Hofstede's insights to design culturally sensitive training programs. And for example, in a collective culture, team-based learning activities are more effective, while individualistic cultures, self-paced modules may be preferred. So finally, global strategy formulation. For organizations operating internationally, Hofstede's framework helps tailor strategies to local markets. And for instance, marketing campaigns in masculine cultures might emphasize achievement and status, while those in feminine cultures could focus on community and care. So here are some practical tips for implementation. First of all, leverage the data. Lots of data is created, so leverage that. Use Hofstede's country comparisons tool available at sites like hofstedeinsights.com to access specific cultural scores for countries or regions. Engage with teams. Conduct surveys or discussions to understand employees' cultural preferences, especially in diverse teams where national culture may not fully apply. Adapt flexibility, recognize that individuals may deviate from cultural norms, so combine Hofstede's insights with direct feedback. And monitor and adjust. This would mean continuously assess the effectiveness of culturally informed decisions and refine approaches based on outcomes. Here are some limitations to consider. Um, Generalization risk. Hofstede's dimensions are based on national averages and may not apply to every individual or subculture. Dynamic cultures evolve, so managers should complement Hofstede's data with current observations or real-time insights, for instance, from web searches or employee feedback. Context matters. Organizational culture industry norms may override national cultural tendencies in some cases. And by understanding and applying Hofstede's cultural dimensions, managers can make informed, culturally sensitive decisions that enhance team performances, reduce conflicts, and improve global business outcomes. Next, we're going to talk about something else mentioned in week 2, David Ricardo's theory of comparative advantage. Comparative advantage refers to a country's ability to produce a good or service at a lower opportunity cost than another country. Opportunity cost is what a country sacrifices when it produces one good over another. According to Ricardo, countries should specialize in producing goods where they have a comparative advantage, for instance, the lowest opportunity cost, and trade with others to maximize efficiency and mutual benefit. So, some key ideas are even if a country is less efficient at producing all goods, no absolute advantage, it can still benefit from trade by focusing on the good it produces relatively more efficiently. So, some assumptions are two countries, two goods, and fixed resources, uh, for instance, labor, constant production costs and no trade barriers, and differences in production across uh, countries. An outcome, specialization and trade lead to greater total output and consumption than if each country produced everything domestically. So outcome specialization and trade lead to greater total output and consumptions than if each country produced everything domestically. An example to consider in two countries, Portugal and England, and we'll have an example here in a minute, producing wine and cloth. Here is Ricardo's classic example. Portugal can produce 1 unit of wine in 80 hours or 1 unit of cloth in 90 hours. England, on the other hand, can produce 1 unit of wine in 120 hours or 1 unit of cloth in 100 hours. So what are the opportunity costs? Well, in Portugal, producing one wine costs 80 over 90 or 0.89 units of cloth. Producing one cloth costs 1.125 units of wine. In England, producing one wine costs 120 over or 1.2 units of cloth, and producing one cloth costs 0.83 units of wine. Are you starting to see a pattern here? Comparative advantage has a lower opportunity cost for wine, 0.89 cloth versus England's 1.2 cloth, so it specializes in wine. England has a lower opportunity cost for cloth, 0.83 wine versus Portugal's 1.125 wine, so it specializes in cloth. And trade Portugal and in trade, Portugal trades wine for England's cloth, and both consume more than they could have alone as specialization increases total output. Adam Smith's absolute advantage was introduced by Adam Smith, and it occurs when a country can produce a good using fewer resources, for instance, less labor or time, than another country. Key idea would be a country with absolute advantage is more efficient in producing a specific good. An example would be in the above case, Portugal has an absolute advantage in both wine, 80 versus 120 hours, and cloth, 90 versus 100 hours, because it uses fewer hours for both. Here's a great chart that you can use and should have at your side when you're writing your assignment for week number 2. It compares and contrasts comparative advantage and absolute advantage in a number of different ways across definition, focus, trade implications, scope, and example outcome. So how comparative advantage drives trade? Well, it drives it in 3 ways: specialization, mutual benefit, and global efficiency. Specialization, countries focus on goods where they have a comparative advantage, increasing global efficiency. A mutual benefit would be trade allows each country to consume beyond its own production possibilities frontier, or PPFs. And global efficiency would be the total world output rises as resources are allocated to their most productive uses. And also, there are practical applications for managers, and there's supply chain optimization and strategic partnerships. So the practical applications for managers would be sourcing. Managers can use comparative advantage to decide where to locate production, for instance, manufacturing in a country with lower opportunity costs for labor-intensive goods. That's one of the reasons Vietnam was chosen by China and other MNEs, Samsung and Korea, to set up their factories there for that reason: lower labor costs, but a high education value in the country. Supply chain optimization. Firms can source components from countries with comparative advantages in specific amounts. For instance, tech from Taiwan, textiles from Bangladesh. And strategic partnerships. Understanding comparative advantage helps negotiate trade agreements or partnerships that leverage each country's strengths. And some limitations these are simplistic assumptions. So Ricardo's model assumes 2 goods, constant costs, and no trade barriers, which oversimplifies real-world complexities like transportation costs or tariffs. Dynamic changes, comparative advantage shift over time due to technology, education, or resource availability. And finally, distribution effects. While trade benefit countries overall, some groups, for instance, workers in non-competitive industries, may face losses which the model doesn't address. In summary, comparative advantage explains why trade is beneficial, even if for less efficient countries, focusing on opportunity cost rather than absolute efficiency. Managers can use this principle to optimize global operations and sourcing strategies. Well, this concludes the formal portion of our presentation this week. I want to thank you all for your attention, and I wish you lots of luck on your assignments this week. You're doing a very good job, and if you continue working at the high level that you've done, that you did this past week, then I think that we're going to have a lot of great, great papers to look at, a lot of great expectations. So anyway, you all stay safe out there. And if you have any questions, please reach out, and you can contact me via email or telephone, and I'll be there, and we'll work through whatever issues that you may have. And in the meantime, I'll see you in class. Good night, everybody. Stay safe.